October 17, 1973. A single announcement from Riyadh sends shockwaves through every gas station, stock exchange, and government building from Washington to Tokyo. Oil prices quadruple overnight. Lines form at gas pumps across America. European factories shut down. The global economy grinds to a halt. The weapon wasn't nuclear. It was oil. And the men who wielded it weren't generals or presidents. They were Arab princes who had just learned the most valuable lesson in modern finance. Scarcity is the ultimate currency. This is another story where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. For decades, the story seemed straightforward. Western oil companies discovered black gold beneath the Arabian desert. They built the wells, shipped the crude, and paid modest royalties to local rulers. The Arabs provided the land. The West provided everything else: technology, capital, expertise, and markets. Oil was cheap, abundant, and controlled by a handful of American and European corporations known as the Seven Sisters. These companies set prices, production levels, and terms. Desert sheiks collected their checks and built palaces. Everyone understood their role in this arrangement. The system worked beautifully. For the West, American consumers paid 25 cents per gallon at the pump. European industries ran on cheap energy. Oil executives in Houston and London counted profits, while Arab rulers counted their blessings. The desert kingdoms seemed content to remain junior partners in their own resource extraction. Oil money flowed like the crude itself. Simple, predictable, controllable. But beneath the surface, a different story was taking shape. Young Arab leaders educated at Oxford and Harvard returned home with uncomfortable questions. Why did Western companies keep 85% of the profits from Arab oil? Why did consuming nations tax gasoline more than producing nations earned from selling it? Why did the people who owned the oil have the least say in its price? The math was becoming impossible to ignore. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi struck first. In 1969, he demanded higher payments from oil companies operating in his country. When they refused, he threatened nationalization. The companies, accustomed to dealing with compliant rulers, initially dismissed the young colonel's demands. They miscalculated. Gaddafi wasn't bluffing. He seized Western oil assets and negotiated new terms that doubled Libya's revenue per barrel. Other Arab leaders watched carefully. If Libya could extract better terms from the oil giants, why couldn't they? The lesson spread across the region like wildfire. Ownership mattered more than partnership. Leverage mattered more than negotiation. Control mattered more than cooperation. In 1960, 5 oil-producing nations had formed the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. For over a decade, OPEC remained largely ceremonial. A club for oil ministers to share grievances and coordinate modest policy adjustments. Western oil executives viewed the organization as theater. Arab rulers playing at international diplomacy, while real decisions were made in corporate boardrooms. This dismissive attitude would prove catastrophic. By 1973, OPEC had grown stronger and more coordinated. Arab members had begun working together on pricing and production quotas. They studied global supply chains, tracked inventory levels, and monitored consumption patterns. These weren't simple desert sheiks anymore. They were sophisticated energy economists with Harvard MBAs and Oxford degrees. When the Yom Kippur War erupted in October 1973, Arab OPEC members found their moment. Israel's conflict with Egypt and Syria provided perfect cover for economic warfare against the West. Supporting Arab states was popular. Punishing Western allies of Israel was justified. Quadrupling oil prices was presented as political solidarity. The real motivation was financial revolution. Oil prices jumped from $3 per barrel to over $12 in a matter of weeks. Gas stations across America ran dry. European governments imposed speed limits and driving restrictions to conserve fuel. The global economy plunged into recession as energy costs soared. Arab oil producers suddenly controlled hundreds of billions of dollars in new revenue. Money that had previously flowed to Western oil companies now poured into sovereign wealth funds in Riyadh, Kuwait City, and Abu Dhabi. Desert kingdoms became global financial powers overnight. The petrodollar was born. These weren't just higher oil prices. This was the largest wealth transfer in human history. Trillions of dollars shifted from Western consumers to Arab producers over the following decade. Oil money bought London real estate, Swiss bank accounts, and American Treasury bonds. Arab investments flowed into everything from Hollywood studios to Midwestern farmland. The financial relationship between East and West had been permanently reversed. Countries that once begged for development loans now provided the capital that kept Western economies afloat. Arab central banks became major creditors to the same governments that had once treated them as junior partners. Money had become the ultimate equalizer. But the oil weapon cut both ways. Western nations responded with strategic petroleum reserves, energy efficiency programs, and alternative energy research. The 1979 Iranian Revolution triggered a second oil shock, pushing prices even higher and accelerating Western efforts to reduce oil dependence. By the 1980s, increased production from non-OPEC countries and reduced consumption from efficiency gains began undermining the cartel's pricing power. Oil prices collapsed in 1986, forcing Arab producers to learn painful lessons about market dynamics and economic diversification. The same weapon that had transformed them into global powers could also destroy their economies when turned against them. The cycle revealed an essential truth about resource-based wealth. Control of supply creates temporary advantage. Sustainable prosperity requires economic sophistication that goes far beyond owning valuable commodities. The Arab oil producers who thrived were those who used their windfall to build modern economies, world-class education systems, and diversified investment portfolios. Those who simply spent their oil wealth on consumption and corruption found themselves vulnerable when prices inevitably fell. Today's global economy still bears the fingerprints of that 1973 revolution. Sovereign wealth funds from oil-producing nations own significant stakes in major Western corporations. Arab financial centers compete with New York and London for international investment flows. The descendants of desert rulers sit on the boards of tech companies and media conglomerates. The names have changed. The dynamics haven't. Chinese rare earth minerals, Russian natural gas, and Democratic Republic of Congo cobalt all follow similar patterns. Resource owners are learning to extract maximum value from their assets. Consuming nations are discovering that economic dependence creates political vulnerability. Supply chains that seemed stable for decades can be weaponized overnight. The lesson of 1973 keeps repeating in new forms across different industries and geographies. Every generation believes it has solved the problem of resource dependence. Every generation learns that ownership still matters more than efficiency. The countries that control what others need will always have more leverage than the countries that simply consume more effectively. Power flows toward those who control scarcity. The rest is just accounting.